Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com with our weekly legislative live stream going over the important bills being heard in committee down at the state capitol in Denver. We have Michael Vance, legislative director of the Libertarian Party of Colorado. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, Brandon?
Hey, very well. Thank you. Thank you. We also have Jody on the call here. Jody, really appreciate you always going down to the Capitol, speaking out, and giving a voice to us people here in Colorado who still believe in liberty and freedom.
Thank you for having me on.
Perfect. And we do have some special guests, so we're going to go ahead and give them the floor here. There's a big bill being heard this week. We've talked about previously. It's called Senate Bill 158. So we're going to go and give them the floor and let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about this bill and what we can try and do to stop it. So go for it, guys.
Perfect. My name is Jimmy Smers. This is my partner, Ashley Troxel. We have a company, Psych4, which has been working in the psychedelic community in the state for a little bit. I also have a Twitter, Psych4 News. We are organizing an effort to defeat Senate Bill 24158, the social media to protect juveniles disclosures report. But really at the core of this bill, if you go down in the third section, there's a couple big concerning things here. The first is that this bill is going to require that any social media user must verify their age. Most likely, this is going to be by providing them a government ID. It would also require all social media companies to keep all the metadata on all users for at least a year. So we certainly have some First Amendment issues with this. And then if you go down a little further, it prevents social media companies from letting a user know that they may be currently investigated for violations of the bill. So we're getting into some Fourth Amendment issues there. At this point, the bill has not received much scrutiny. It flew through the Senate because of a few factors. The first one, obviously, is the name. Some groups we've heard are less enthusiastic to come out against a bill with the words protect juveniles in it. It doesn't make for a good 30-second clip if someone happens to perish because they fought against an unconstitutional bill that was labeled to protect juveniles. Also, there was a number of organizations that testified in favor of the bill in the original Senate hearing. We were at the hearing and testified against it. It was actually kind of striking how coordinated the various groups were at the original hearing. The bill does have one Republican sponsor. Representative Frizzle from Colorado Springs is a primary sponsor. And so we have heard indirect feedback from a few legislators that they had not given it a hard look since it was bipartisan. They were supposed to have testimony last Thursday, and they canceled that, saying that it was supposed to be for this upcoming Thursday. But when we went to testify, we actually realized that it is Wednesday upon adjournment, which unfortunately, with the last week of the legislative session, that time frame is huge. As far as could be anywhere from noon till 5 o'clock. We just don't know at this point. But on the good side, we have heard a number of rumors of growing concern and hate about this bill inside the Capitol. So where there are a lot of bills, they are just going to push through. This is one that we actually really think is vulnerable if we can organize some real resistance to it. We have posted some info on fighting the bill on our website. That website is psych4.com. And if you click on top in the news blog, that gives a detailed, it's the number 4. Yep. And if you go up to the news blog up there, it's a pretty extensive guide of who to contact and various scripts of what you can either offer in testimony or write your individual legislators. And so we've put that together. And then also my partner Ashley is leading a workshop on it this Tuesday. And so she has a few more details on that if anyone would like to attend. And we are also going to do a march for people wanting to testify to the Capitol Wednesday morning.
So I'll just jump in and talk about the workshop. I'm Ashley Troxel. I'm first VP of the Denver Republican Women and co-captain of HD5 for the Republicans. The workshop that we're giving is nonpartisan. It's just basic information on information about the bill and how to testify at the hearing. It's going to be at 6 p.m. at Plant Magic Cafe. That's going to be about 2 blocks from Independence Institute at the address is 925 East 17th Street. And it's going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. And then at 8 a.m. the next morning, Wednesday morning, we're going to march from Plant Magic Cafe to the Capitol down Colfax to testify against the bill. We invite everyone to join us. Please join us. We'll have free coffee. And so please come out and support killing this bill in committee Wednesday. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's incredible. Really appreciate the effort to stop this really bad bill. I mean, I think it's one of those that did fly under the radar for so long that people didn't realize just how egregious it is. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. Just to hammer those points again. So the Senate Bill 158 being heard Wednesday in the House Education Committee. I always ask people to look at the fiscal note just because it gives you a little bit more clear information. But I mean, it's as clear as day. I mean, that has got to be frightening to anybody out there who believes in internet privacy or just freedom of speech, right? The bill requires social media companies to verify and track the age of each platform user and apply protections for juveniles. So, like you were saying, I mean, there's the digital ID push. There's a way to really limit who has access to social media. I mean, absolutely and utterly crazy. And then, of course, the fact that they have to hold everybody's metadata for a year and then give it to law enforcement without being able to give that information to the people using the social media platform. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So thank you so much for the effort there, pushing this bill. Definitely we'll share these links everywhere, psyched4.com. Have you gotten some good response? You got several people signed up to go testify so far?
We had a number of people set up to testify last Thursday, and I suspect that may have been why they actually moved the testimony, is that they're kind of trying to discourage a very upset group of people from offering testimony against this. Like I said, in the original round through the Senate committee, it was very well organized of a number of people saying that a juvenile that I love purchased something bad off the internet and something happened. And for that reason, if we can just save one child, we should pass this bill. And so we have a lot of people who are very concerned about this bill and are ready to testify. And I do think it is very vulnerable right now.
Yes, so
Awesome.
join us. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah. Please, tag us on the Twitter posts and everything. We'll try and get this information out there as much as possible. But really, people, if there's one bill you testify on this week, show up, speak out against Senate Bill 158. How do you feel about the committee it's going to, the House Education? Do you think there's anybody there that may be worth talking to versus others?
No, and at this very late moment, there have been some people who are kind of discussing the idea of amending, but I think really if we're able to contact everybody beforehand and really point out the constitutionality issues and that this has not really received the proper scrutiny, the hope is that we can put enough pressure where we can flip, the necessary votes. But we are going to go down to the Capitol tomorrow and reach out to each of them individually and see who is where.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely encourage people to reach out to the committee members, let them know how bad this bill is. Something they probably haven't heard a lot about. So really appreciate you doing that. Really appreciate the activism. Michael, you had mentioned before we started something about, why are the legislators not supporting something that the voters passed in terms of the natural medicine bill last year initiative? Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious. The natural, I don't remember the prop number at this point in time, but legalized mushrooms were legalized, and now they're using this as an excuse to attack mushrooms. Sorry, they're using mushrooms as an excuse to attack social media at this point. So I'm just kind of why the Dems are doing this. I mean, I always thought the Dems were a party that believed in letting people live and let live, as they at least love to claim. I mean, I definitely see where Democrats don't do that. I'm not a Democrat, and part of the reason is because they don't actually do what they say. So I'm just kind of, so my question is really, are there anybody that we can actually, I guess, Brandon kind of answered that a little bit, but, or asked that question already, but I'm just kind of curious why they're not sticking up for our rights, particularly when it's something that the voters already said they wanted to have in the state.
Well, one of the big things is that the cost associated with the psychedelic program that was kind of built by Senate President Steve Fenberg last year is pretty astronomical. And so one of the things that they received in the original round of amendments was that the regulated cannabis side was able to get carve-outs from the bill while the citizens were not. So if you were licensed by the state, then you could talk about cannabis on social media in a positive way. The rest of the citizens could not. And so there's certainly a concern that they may try to just allow the regulated businesses to, be the only ones to talk about the positive benefits of psychedelics online, and that would allow those regulated businesses to, be the only ones who really could advertise. Another problem is that we've seen states across the country really moving towards legalizing psilocybin. And if you look at Colorado's financial model, it kind of just assumed that Colorado and Oregon were the only ones going to be able to offer psilocybin services. And now the demand for that has greatly decreased. So if you are trying to make it so that the general fund of the taxpayers doesn't have to cover the expense, then you can restrict the speech online of any competition that is not regulated and taxed by the state.
Yes, and what's important to note is that the citizens passed the Natural Medicine Health Act in 2022, and then our state legislature pushed through Senate Bill 290 in 2023, which rewrote that legislation. And so what's in law right now is not what we passed. What's in law right now is really set up more for this commercialized model than the community-based healing that we've had such success with in Denver prior to statewide legalization.
You said that was Senate Bill 23-290?
Yep, from Senate President C. Fenberg and Judy Amabile, Representative Amabile.
Gotcha. Well, really appreciate you joining us. Definitely look forward to helping trying to defeat this bad bill. Let's hope we get some good people showing up, speaking out, reaching out to the legislators, let them know how bad this is. And I'd love to talk to you again further about the state of the psychedelic industry or community here in Colorado. So really appreciate you joining us. We're going to jump in back to our regular scheduled programs. Any other questions, Michael, or any parting statements from the guests?
No, but we're going to hang around in case we have any thoughts on anything else, we don't mind.
Please. Yeah, you're definitely invited to stick on the panel here and jump in and talk about any of the bills, any other bills here.
I would just ask, when you guys get done with your conversations at the Capitol tomorrow, I want to send out a bill to the entire state, or excuse me, I want to send out an email to the entire state, just kind of giving a little bit more background information on this, so that way they know when it's time to talk to people on Wednesday, who to reach out to specifically, and really put a lot of pressure on specific individuals down at the Capitol. Additionally, I want to make sure that people are coming to committee and actually testifying against Senate Bill 158. So if you guys could let me know who those specific people are, so that way we have the best shot of killing this bill, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And Blue Rising is very well organized. They are supporting this legislation. And so it is very important that we turn up in the legislative committee hearing, because last time we were so outnumbered in the Senate hearing. And so we really need people to turn out for this specific committee hearing. So thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, appreciate you. We'll share all the links all over. Please tag everybody on your social media posts. We'll make sure to get it out there. But psyched4.com, click on the news blog and find some information about more detailed information about how bad Senate Bill 158 is. Absolutely terrible bill. Just to reiterate to people, it's going to be heard on Wednesday in the House Education Committee upon adjournment of the State House, House Committee Room 107. So please, people, show up on May 1st, speak out against this bad bill. So perfect. Awesome. We're going to go ahead and jump into our regularly scheduled program here. And let's see what we got going on this week. So as always, we start off looking at last week's bills. So these are the bills we talked about last week, some of the most important or biggest bills, in our opinion, of what was being heard down in committees at the state capitol. Of course, just to reiterate, we always talk about committee hearings more than the House or the Senate as a whole, because as an individual here in Colorado, you have an amazing opportunity to show up to these committee hearings. You could even do it over Zoom. Show up in person is ideal, but have your voice heard, look these legislators in the eyes, tell them how good or bad the legislation is, and really have an impact and use your voice. So we're encouraging people, get involved in the committee hearings. That's really where your opportunity as an individual to have your voice heard is at. So last week, Monday, Senate Bill 171, the restoration of Wolverines, did pass. Not shocked at that. Of course, we saw some articles. Michael, you were talking about the wolf kills of these calves. So I can imagine, this biology down this eco biology by our legislators, is probably doomed for tragedy again, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. I can only imagine how much more livestock is going to be affected by the restoration of wolverines. Seems like it's going to hurt a lot of farmers, and it's already hard enough these days to be a farmer. I grew up on a farm, and I watched so many different people struggle. So to imagine what it's like to be a farmer in a place like Colorado, where costs are even higher than a place in the Midwest where I grew up, it's gonna be a real struggle for people when we restore wolverine populations near livestock and people lose their livestock.
Yeah. House Bill 1380 passed last week, regulation of debt related services. No surprise there. We got access to distributed generation. That was the power, the energy, trying to get people on all electric. Of course, we know that that's been a problem with the recent wind and power shutdown in Denver there in the western suburban area. So that bill did pass, Senate Bill 207. House Bill 1290, the short-term rental property classification, was killed. That was kind of a companion bill to Senate Bill 33 to really go after short-term rental properties and increase the taxes on them. So that bill did die. House Concurrent Resolution 1001, the senior property tax exemption portability, allowing seniors who've been in their home for a certain amount of time to be exempt from paying property taxes, even if they moved, unfortunately was killed. So really disappointed to see that one not make it, but of course not too surprised. We had House Concurrent Resolution 1006, the property tax revenue growth limit. That was Bob Marshall's kind of campaign bill, if you will, trying to do something about property taxes. So surprised to see that pass. I guess, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see if it actually makes it through the entire House, which will be heard this week. Call for an Article 5 convention, House Joint Resolution 1024. I personally am glad that bill died. I think Article 5 convention is too risky. We talked a lot about it last week for those interested. House Bill 1451, the including hair length in the Crown Act, did pass there, so no longer discrimination based on hair length. Resolution 1023, the resolution forced labor for electric vehicles. Actually, kind of surprised that passed. That was a Republican bill, making it so that Colorado can't purchase electric vehicles from places where slave labor is used. I was a little surprised to see that pass, but yeah, there you go. And then, of course, as you can imagine, 1005, the Parents' Bill of Rights, was killed in committee. No shocker there. One of the more controversial bills this session was House Bill 1460, the law enforcement misconduct. From a liberty perspective, a good bill, but I know the Republicans aren't very happy with it. That bill did pass. The birth equity bill did pass there. Senate Bill 184, that was one of the big transportation bills we're seeing this year, trying to set up this front range rail scheme. Did pass, no surprise there. Senate Bill 208, the electricity for regulated electricity for electric vehicles passed. House Bill 1313, very surprised. This bill's become a little more controversial than I think the bill sponsors expected, creating these housing in transit-oriented communities, kind of zones or regulations for local governments to adhere to in order to get this state money, state tax money. So that got delayed. It'll be interesting to see where it goes this week, or if it makes it through the legislature now that we're in the home stretch here. House Bill 1152, the accessory dwelling units did pass. Wednesday of last week, looking there, seeing where we were at. We had the maternal health midwives bill, a bill that I know was not a lot of people were really happy about, creating kind of new licensing for midwives in Colorado, but kind of updating some of what they were doing there. That bill was delayed, not voted on in committee last week. Senate Bill 205, the Consumer Protections for Artificial Intelligence passed. House Bill 1124, the discrimination in places of public accommodation passed. Thursday of last week, 1304, the minimum parking requirements, saying that new development doesn't have to have, for high density housing, apartment buildings wouldn't have to have minimum parking requirements. Did pass. House Bill 1175, the government's right to property for affordable housing, where local governments can purchase affordable housing as a right of first refusal from private property owners. That did pass. Senate Bill 154, the other accessory dwelling units bill failed, did die in committee. Senate Bill 210, the modifications to laws regarding elections. I know there's a lot of people in third parties like the Libertarian Party very concerned about that one. That did pass. We'll have to see what kind of amendments it got. And then 002, the concurrent resolution, modify the constitutional election deadlines, passed as well. Important bill for people involved in elections. Senate Bill 158, as we just talked about, was delayed last week, didn't get a vote. Senate Bill 173, regulate mortuary science occupations, creating a new licensing scheme for mortuary businesses, unfortunately did pass. So that's the update from last week. A lot of bills. We're in the last home stretch here, really the last 2 weeks of the legislative session. We'll see exactly what happens. Still a lot of bills to be heard. We know they're not all going to make it, so it'll be really interesting to see which ones the Democratic majority decides should pass and which ones they're going to let fall on the calendar there. All right. So here we go, jumping into this week. So talking about Monday, this is talking about April 29th, tomorrow, some of the bills that are going to be heard in committee here. So some of these we've talked about before, of course, but nonetheless, they're getting their committee hearings. Maybe not the first time they've been heard in committee, but like we said, the committee hearings are your best opportunity to speak out, to have a voice, to show up and make an impact, really. So Senate Bill 48, we've talked about a few times. It's Kevin Priola's one of his signature bills in his last year up there to really go after the alcohol industry, if you ask me. I really wanted to point out how much this bill's been amended. I know from a liberty perspective, we were really concerned about where they were sections 5 and 6 that would place restrictions on where liquor licensed drugstores and fermented malt beverage and wine retailers could display alcohol beverages. That was removed, struck from the bill. But they did add this line, Section 9, requiring the Liquor Enforcement Division and the Department of Revenue to adopt rules related to the location of alcohol beverage displays. So I'd say it's still a bad bill. A lot of this is couched, of course, in trying to help people. But nonetheless, when you have mandates on private businesses like this, it definitely creates problems. So bad bill being heard Monday in the Health and Human Services Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the Old State Library. And for anybody on our panel here, feel free to interrupt me, jump in and talk about any of these bills. And if you have anything you'd like to add.
It's an absolutely bad bill. I just hope that thing doesn't get passed, but I will say that I'm glad that they did cut some of it out. I would say they did cut some of the worst portions of it, but it's still really bad bill.
100%. Hopefully it doesn't make it, but I think based on the history, passing out of the Senate and now going to the House, there's a good chance it'll make it. But with some of these bad bills, the calendar is really our best friend at this point, running out of time, so they're not going to get all of these bills through. All right, a bill we have not talked about before, Senate Bill 223, licensing for clinics that provide fertility services. So kind of an interesting bill. This is almost more of a housekeeping bill because it just changes the timeline of when these fertility services have to be licensed. So Fenberg is giving them more time. I imagine there was some concerns from stakeholders in the community and the business, the fertility business, that they weren't able to adhere to this licensing system in time. So it's being delayed. But of course, as libertarians, as liberty-minded individuals, or people who support free markets, licensing for occupational licensing and these schemes like this are always a bad idea. They create barriers to entry into the market, raise costs, and prevent people from providing goods and services that otherwise people would readily pay for. So definitely a late session bill, just introduced a few days ago and going through the finance committee. We'll see where this one goes, but overall, I'd say it's a bad bill. The licensing part of it, but really it was going to start on January 1st, 2025. This bill just moves it to July 1st, 2025. So from one point, relatively speaking, it's a good bill, but overall, it'd be a better bill if it was trying to end occupational licensing for these fertility services. So that's going to be heard in the Senate Finance Committee tomorrow. Looking also at the Senate Finance Committee, some very interesting bills, three that we highlighted here. House Bill 1286, the Equal Justice Fund Authority. Of course, criminal justice reform is always a big issue, especially these days down at the state capitol in this post-2020 world. However, I think there's some concern, of course, that using taxpayer money to provide monetary support to local organizations, to provide legal representation and legal advice to low-income individuals could potentially have some problems from a liberty perspective there. So, an interesting bill. It's been going through, made all the way through the House, is now in the Senate. So we'll see what happens with this one. Just looking at the fiscal note to give people an idea of how they do it here. This bill creates the Equal Justice Authority, a special purpose authority. The EJA is governed by a 7-member appointed board and must meet at least 4 times per year. Board members serve without compensation, but may be reimbursed for expenses as a result of their duties. They are going to assess a $30 equal justice fee on docket filings in district courts for civil cases, Court of Appeals, and probate courts. So really, creating what is truly a tax, but they're calling it a fee because that's the only way they can get around the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. But the civil case filings in county courts are assessed an equal justice fee of $10, except for filings in small claim courts. This revenue from these fees is not state revenue and must be used to provide access to legal representation for indigent defendants and to cover the EJA's direct and indirect administration costs. So persons whose income is below 250% of the federal poverty limit are exempt from paying the fee. So I thought this was interesting, especially seeing what's going on down in Auraria campus, all these protests. I'm thinking about who these Democratic legislators would like to funnel some taxpayer money to in order to help them out of a jam going through the courts. Any thoughts on this one, Michael?
Yeah, I think that this is a little ridiculous. I mean, this is going to be used to help weaponize, particularly you mentioned the people at the Aurora campus. They're going to weaponize those people because they're not going to make anything. They're going to college. There's nothing wrong with going to college, but typically if you're in that setting, you're not making a ton of money. So these people are going to be able, and I'm talking just maybe a couple $1,000s a year. I know that was my case in college. There were a few years where I made probably less than $2,000. So I would have to say this is going to be used to weaponize a lot of really nasty stuff, particularly look at what's coming up. We got an election here in a few months. 2020 was awful, and they just want to take something like this and weaponize the political atmosphere that's already highly volatile going into 2024.
Definitely. And I think this bill kind of points out a couple different issues that these legislators always get away with. And that's by calling something a fee instead of a tax. They circumvent the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That's why the voters are supposed to be able to vote on any tax increase in Colorado. That's in the state constitution. They call it a fee to get around that. So this kind of illustrates how they do it. This also illustrates how they funnel money to their friendly organizations, right? So where's this money going to go? All this millions of dollars are going to be collecting, right? Well, there's a qualified civil legal aid provider. So a 501c3 nonprofit organization, other than the Colorado recipient of a Federal Legal Services Corporation field grant that provides legal representation and advice to people in Colorado who are at or below 250% of the federal poverty guideline to support their access to basic needs such as housing, employment, health services, education, assistance with family matters, and immigration status issues. Now
That's
I can
it.
think off the top. I can think off the top of my head several state legislators and their cronies down there who work in that field, who work for these types of organizations. And you can think that some of this tax money could potentially go to their organizations or their allies and friends and their Democratic Party adjacent organizations. And now they have a new avenue for collecting taxpayer money in this social justice type of venue to, hire lawyers and support the people they want to support and go after and not help the people they don't want to help. So a really bad bill. I think this kind of legislation is actually more insidious than a lot of people realize. But House Bill 1286, definitely a bad bill down there. So really bad one. Made it all the way through the House, is going to be in the Senate Finance Committee Monday. That's LSBB, the Legislative Service Building. That's the building across from the state capitol on the south side at 1:30 p.m. So check that out for those interested. A great opportunity to speak out against the bill, to see what's really going on down there, and truly, really try and stymie the fleecing of taxpayer dollars to support their little friendly organizations down there. So it's not the first time we've seen a bill like this. But nonetheless, that's how it goes. That's the game of politics is played, taking taxpayer money and rewarding your allies with it. And that's how they secure their power base for years to come. But moving on, House Bill 1288, also in the Senate Finance Committee tomorrow. Now, talk about privacy concerns, right? So, people sign up for this earned income tax credit. They want to get this taxpayer money back as a tax credit. So that means even if you don't owe taxes, you're going to get a receive taxpayer money if you qualify for this risk credit. Well, there's always strings attached. Government tracks your data. They know who you are. So this bill, if passed, will require the Department of Revenue to share the contact information of a resident individual who claimed the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit, or both, on or before July 1st of each year with the Department of Early Childhood, the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Local Affairs, and the Department of Public Health and Environment if requested. The information disclosed remains confidential, and the recipient departments may only use it for the purpose of benefit outreach. So another way for them to siphon taxpayer money. Hey, you qualified for this. We're going to go ahead and reach out to you and figure out all these other programs we can get you attached to and get you a little bit more entrenched in the system, unfortunately. So this bill, has made it all the way through the House and is now in the Senate. So it'll be in the Senate Finance Committee Monday, 1:30 p.m. So it's several interesting bills being heard down there. Really bad one. If you're down there to testify on all three of these if you could, because, have your voice heard. That's Senate Bill 223, House Bill 1286, and House Bill 1288, all in the Senate Finance Committee on Monday, April 29th at 1:30 p.m. All right. Moving on to one of the law enforcement bills this year, House Bill 1372, regulating law enforcement use of prone restraint. Definitely heavily amended, as you can see. This whole bill summary is crossed out. So they totally changed the original thought process of it originally and totally rewrote it. So it's different from when we've heard about it before. Let's look at the fiscal note, because that's a great resource to kind of give us a little bit of a distilled version of it. So the bill requires any Colorado law enforcement agency that employs a Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, post board, certified peace officer, sheriffs, and the Colorado State Patrol to adopt written policies and procedures concerning the use of prone position and prone restraint by July 1st, 2025, and posted on its website. The bill specifies what the policies and procedures must include. Each law enforcement entity must review and update policies and procedures at least every 5 years. So this bill got watered down tremendously. I think there was a lot of outcry from the law enforcement community, a lot of people out there who were not happy with trying to limit law enforcement's ability to use prone restraint. An interesting bill from a liberty perspective, probably a good bill to create a little bit more transparency and to have law enforcement not use maybe some techniques that are otherwise kind of dangerous.
I think you're right.
Oh,
I mean, we talk a lot about like this woke stuff and how everything's gotten kind of crazy in America, but there are some actual issues when it comes to law enforcement that we should be talking about. Um, and I think a lot of the woke stuff kind of prevents us from being able to have that actual conversation. But this stuff like this, I think, is good. I mean, there are some transparency issues that should be addressed, and I think this attempts to um, I think this is at least an attempt to satisfy that need. And I'm glad that they are at least working with law enforcement because I don't want a bill that's going to be too impunitive to the law enforcement agencies either. But what we need is restraint. So, and we need a open and transparent law enforcement. So I think this is a good way to do that.
all right. So bill's being heard tomorrow. That's Monday in the Judiciary Committee at 1:30 p.m. in the Old Supreme Court. As we saw, this bill's gone made it all the way through the House with those amendments and is now in the Senate. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of reception it receives there. All right. Continuing on with Monday, we're going to move to the Senate Education Committee. So, an interesting bill, of course, one of the big topics in public education has been what is and what is not allowed in libraries, right? You know, there's a good vocal faction of parents of concerned people out there, mostly on the conservative side, who are really worried about some of the pornographic material in libraries and public schools. We've seen that a big issue, of course, from a liberty perspective. I'd love to see, some books in public schools that maybe teach you how to 3D print your own firearm or maybe grow cannabis or, something along those lines. You know, the do-it-yourself home machine gun. I think that book is still banned in public schools, unfortunately, but, I'm sure that's not what these bill sponsors are concerned about, of course, right? Senate Bill
Exactly.
216, standards for decisions regarding library resources. So there's been a big talk. We saw another bill on similar issue get killed. So not surprising that this is another bill that they brought out about it. But it's a long bill, a lot of information here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bill history. So this is the new version of this bill that was killed earlier this session. It was only introduced to the calendar on the 24th of April, so a very recent bill. Looking at the fiscal note for kind of a distilled version of what this bill actually does, it requires boards of public libraries to establish policies for the acquisition, retention, and display of library resources, as well as for consideration of the removal of materials from circulation upon a request from a patron. Libraries must not remove materials based on demographic characteristics of the author of the material or based on partisan disapproval of the material in question. Interesting. Libraries may remove materials from circulation only if the material has been reviewed based on the policy that the board adopts. Boards that adopt policies for the potential removal of materials must post that policy publicly. A person who requests that a material be removed from circulation must reside in the service of the area of the library in question. These requests to remove materials are open records under the Colorado Open Records Act. So, of course, our state legislators hate being subject to Colorado Open Records law. But, of course, anybody who wants to go after books in the library, they want them to be fully exposed. The bill protects any library staff member from retaliation, discrimination, or termination for refusing to comply with the request to remove material from circulation for any resource that is not removed in accordance with board policy. So, interesting bill, kind of trying to formalize the rules of when books or material can be removed from libraries and when they can't be. So, not sure exactly from a liberty perspective. I would say it's probably a bad bill in as much as that it's a state mandate over local libraries, kind of taking away their discretion or their ability to make their own decisions about what should be allowed. But nonetheless, a contentious issue that is not going away. So Senate Bill 216 will be heard Monday in the Education Committee, Senate Committee Room 357 at 1:30 p.m. All the committee hearings are live streamed. The audio, at least, the audio only is live streamed on the legislative website. That's leg.colorado.gov. So people can tune in, listen to committee hearings. And of course, when a bill is being heard in the House or the Senate as a whole, that is live streamed on the Colorado Channel YouTube channel as well. So, part of what we're doing is really trying to give people an opportunity to get more engaged, more involved with their local governments. I did want to announce we do have another guest joining us here, and that is uh, Mayor Aaron Lamb of Keensburg. Mayor Lamb, how are you, sir? You're muted there. Nope, still can't hear you there. Let me I think it's your audio there. You're not muted. It must be something with your audio. But nonetheless, I'll join in when you can. We'll go ahead and keep moving on here. Still got another bill being heard on Monday. Last bill we want to talk about Monday. Very interesting one. Senate Bill 225, trauma-informed school safety drills. So I don't know about you, but I'm a product of Colorado Public Schools here, for better or for worse. Thankfully, I grew up in a time when we didn't have these safety drills where armed law enforcement's running through the halls and kids are being traumatized. So I really see, I never really agree with anything Senator Marchman does, says, or posts online, but this bill might not be a bad one, actually. This bill, looking at the bill text, she's the only sponsor on it, which it doesn't necessarily bode well for the bill. But the bill requires a school to provide written notification at least 5 days in advance of a scheduled date of a school safety drill to the parent, legal guardian, or legal custodian of the student, detailing when the school safety drill will take place. So, I can imagine, for these poor kids are already subject to so much trauma going to a public school, right? The fact that they have these drills that can cause some serious concerns among the students, these young impressionable students, then it seems like this is potentially a good bill to let parents know, hey, your kid's going to experience some crazy safety drill here, and if you wanted to get them out of school that day, hey, now you have the opportunity to. So new bill just introduced here on April 26th, 2024 in the Senate. So really late bill in the session. It probably Marchman using one of her, every legislator has about 5 bills they can introduce, and she probably has an extra one and decided to introduce this one at the last minute is my best guess. But Senate Committee Room 357 on Monday, April 29th at 1:30 p.m. So show up if you're interested, speak out, or submit written testimony to the committee sponsor, to the committee members and the bill sponsors. Let them know what you think. So that's what we got for Monday. Some really interesting bills being heard, a little smorgasbord of different types of bills as well. But we do have Mayor Aaron Lamb on here. Just wanted to introduce him. And how are you this evening, Mr. Mayor?
Very good. Are you able to hear me now? Do apologize about that earlier. Brandon, I just want to say thank you as always. I think this is the most valuable resource that any Coloradan has to know what is going on in that Golden Dome and how they're trying to take our rights and to get people interested and involved so that we can actually speak out and hopefully make a positive impact against this.
Appreciate the kind words, sir. If just to give people that extra information there, if you go to freestatecolorado.com/testify, there's a guide I wrote really giving you detailed information about how to testify on a bill at the state legislature, how to show up at a committee hearing. You even have a recording of when I was down there last year. So just trying to really empower people with these calls, get them involved in our government, and really pay attention to what's happening down under the Gold Dome, as you say, in Denver, because people pay attention to national politics, but it's not as impactful in our lives as what happens locally here in the state. And we have such an opportunity as individuals to have an impact, to speak out, to reach out, and really create that relationship and communication with our state elected representatives. So freestatecolorado.com/testify. Check that out as well. But let's go ahead and jump into Tuesday. So Tuesday this week, this is another bill that you can testify on. All the bills we're talking about, you have the opportunity to show up at the state capitol and testify in these committee hearings, or do it remotely over Zoom, or submit an email even. So Senate Bill 195 is something we've talked about before. There's this big language down at the state capitol about vulnerable road users, of course. So, they're talking about bicyclists, pedestrians, I imagine. But really, this bill has been amended pretty heavily. But what I think the big concern is this AVIS system. We've talked about this briefly before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. This bill modifies laws governing automated vehicle identification systems, that's AVIS, to clarify that the Department of Transportation, CDOT, has final authority to authorize the use of AVIS on any roads that are part of the state highway system. CDOT may consult with the State Patrol to establish rules relating to the use of AVIS on state highways, including rules for approval and enforcement of the use of AVIS and the amount of civil penalties for violations. So, of course, this is automated vehicle identification systems, a huge privacy concern, something as liberty-minded individuals would be completely opposed for the state to have these monitor systems and cameras, especially for the point of collecting revenue over the people just trying to get to work. Hey, And then, of course, it's not enough to just penalize people and monitor everything we're doing, but that money has to go to critical safety-related asset management projects that the Transportation Commission decides, giving that money so that they can go after protecting vulnerable road users. So, adding extra bike lanes and everything that way. But definitely a very bad bill. I think there's a lot that needs to be said about Avis and a lot of research in maybe some reining in of some of these automated vehicle identification systems that is definitely worth looking into. But very bad bill. Senate Bill 195 being heard down there on Tuesday in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee upon adjournment in LSBA, that's Legislative Service Building, Committee Hearing Room A. This bill made it all the way through the Senate, is now in the House. Probably will continue to go on, but be continue through the House, unfortunately. But it'd be great to see some of the outspoken Democrats in the House, you know, like an Epps or Hernandez or somebody speak out against this. I could see Epps kind of doing that maybe. So interesting bill, bad bill being heard down there on Tuesday. All right, moving on. Also on Tuesday, vulnerable road users, but they're one category of people. But another category of people that the legislator really pays attention to is those using mass transit. And you know what? Not enough people are using government transportation systems. So, our legislators to the rescue here, figuring out ways they can get people to use more mass transit. We saw that bill that passed out of committee last week to get rid of parking spaces. They're trying to create these transit corridors with high density housing and really redesign our state around this kind of mass transit model that I don't think a lot of Coloradans like because they're not using it to begin with, right? So looking at the fiscal note, give us a little bit more detail on this bill. This bill creates a new grant program for youth transit in Colorado Energy Office, extends the ozone season transit grant program, and creates a committee in the Department of Transportation to study the creation of a statewide transit program. So there you go. I mean, really trying to come up with some new schemes, some new ways to continue to subsidize RTD, send some more money, in this case, another $10 million over to RTD and the transportation department to try and give people more incentives, basically giving them free passes to ride buses because they're not riding them otherwise. So being heard Tuesday, the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee upon adjournment in Legislative Service Building A, looking at the bill history real quick, made it all the way through the Senate and its first House committee there. All right. So we got a lot to cover, so apologies if I'm moving a little too quick, but please, anybody on the panel, jump in. Feel free to interrupt me. Perfectly happy with you doing that. A really controversial bill we've talked about before, House Bill 1447, transit reform. So another one of these bills to really redesign Colorado's mass transit system. This bill did get amended. It did have a lot of pushback. It was supposed to be in committee previously, but it had gotten delayed. So it hasn't gotten amended yet because it hasn't gone through a committee hearing. But I expect from everything I'm hearing, there's going to be some serious amendments to this bill. Particularly the part they want to kill out of this bill. Probably the worst part is how RTD board members are elected. So this bill wanted to change, basically terminating the current board at the end of the year and preventing or eliminating the ability of voters to elect all of the board members, and instead allowing the governor to appoint some of his cronies or allies to the board of RTD so that he can push through his agenda and not have the original board members who are elected by the people of Colorado in the way. So two of those voting directors would represent the district at large, appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. That part of the bill got so much outcry from RTD, from Denver, from other places around that have a really good working relationship with RTD that it's expected to be amended out of the bill. It'll be interesting to see the final form of this bill or if it ends up being killed overall. But there's such a huge push for this front range passenger rail. I imagine some parts of this bill will make it through. So bad bill overall. Expect to see some major amendments on Tuesday, April 30th in the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee.
Hey, Brandon.
Yeah.
How many times has that one been delayed? Because I believe that's been delayed a couple times, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I know at least once. At least once. The bill's been around since April 9th. Maybe twice. I don't remember all the times, but they don't show you that on the website here. But I remember we talked about it previously. It was supposed to be probably about 2 weeks ago or so. Now, maybe longer, and got delayed because of that outcry, specifically around the RTD board, eliminating the ability of voters to decide who's on the board. So, yeah.
Bad bill. Let's hope they mess around too long so we can't get it pushed all the way through.
Yeah, it'd be great if 1447 dies entirely, but nonetheless, we'll see.
Hey, week and a
Another,
half.
yeah, week and a half left. So any opportunity to try and slow these bills down or create some controversy around them is in the benefit of liberty for sure. House Bill 1356, bad bill. Bad bill here concerning prohibiting the sale of electronic smoking devices to minors, and in connection therewith establishing the sale of electronic smoking devices to minors as a deceptive trade practice. So this bill, when we talked about it previously, was a lot worse. You can see the strike through here, meaning that it was amended. Basically, this bill originally was going to outlaw any electronic smoking device in the state of Colorado that did not get explicit authorization from the FDA. So thankfully, that was struck from the bill. Pretty ridiculous, that these electronic smoking devices need federal government approval for people using them in Colorado. So what they did is they struck that line out of it and added to minors. So, I imagine it's already illegal to sell some of these electronic smoking devices. Maybe not. Maybe the device itself is not. I'm not actually sure on that. But this bill will amend the Colorado Consumer Protection Act to make the sale of electronic smoking devices to minors an unfair or deceptive trade practice. How it meets that criteria, it's because the legislators say so, not that it has to make any sense, which gives the attorney general or district attorney explicit authority to bring action against a person who sells or offers for a sale an electronic smoking device to an individual who does not meet the age restriction to purchase the electronic smoking device. So I imagine it's going to be 21, of course, because unfortunately, that's where they've pushed the smoking age to as well. So a bad bill that got amended to be not so bad, but still pretty ridiculous. I've seen if it even said which age is in here, but I don't know that I see that. But nonetheless, there you go. So bill being heard down there in the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee on Tuesday, April 30th at 2 p.m. in the old Supreme Court. So another bill for people to speak out against, another bill that comes against our liberty here in Colorado. Senate Bill 112 also being heard Tuesday, this time in the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee. The construction defect action procedures. We've had other mayors like the mayor of Monument jump on here before, and the mayor pro tem, Steve King, talking about construction defects. That's a huge issue that's been kind of plaguing Colorado's construction industry for a long time now, for many, many years. So this bill has to relates to that construction defect issue and changes things in the Reform Act a little bit there. So don't necessarily want to get into all the details on this, but wanted to bring it up just because I know we've talked a lot about the construction defect issue a lot in the past. So wanted to make sure people were aware of this one.
I just wanted to add, Brandon, that the town of Keensburg passed a resolution unanimously in favor of this bill. It's something that we've had not a lot of construction here recently, but a lot of complaints about the new construction, and we have a lot that's coming in. So we are certainly aware and concerned about these issues and want this ability to fix ahead of time to be an option for everyone.
Definitely. There's other ways to provide more affordable housing in Colorado than just government, tenement blocks, right? Like that they seem to be trying to do. And that's allowing private companies, developers, individuals to build condos and townhomes and things like that. Some great starter homes for people, but not be subject to some of these construction defect laws that make it prohibitively costly for them to build them. So great to hear that the town of Keensburg is supporting Senate Bill 112. Being heard in the Local Government Housing Committee in the Senate Committee Room 352 Tuesday at 2 p.m. All right. Looking at House Bill 1300, a bill we've talked about before. I want to bring this one up just because it did get amended quite a bit. I know Tammy Story is one of the most contentious races this year in terms of her potentially losing re-election because she barely won in 22. So interesting to see how she could be potentially making home ownership more expensive for people in her district in Jefferson County there. So let's see the amendments to this bill. Currently, 12 Colorado counties, including we'll read all those here, require some form of wildlife mitigation in connection with the construction of a new residence, but not with and this is the part that was a problem in the past, the sale of, but not with respect to an existing residence. So they definitely took a lot of that out. And now the codes and standards for wildlife mitigation developed by the Wildlife Resiliency Code Board apply only to permitting and inspections for new construction or significant structural expansions or alterations. So if you remember as you saw here, this bill would go after anybody who is selling mountain property to basically force them to make their home more wildlife resistant or wildfire resistant. That got struck from the bill, which is a good thing. But nonetheless, this bill now authorizes counties to establish a program to require wildfire mitigation of existing residences and other structures in accordance with wildfire mitigation standards developed by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, the Colorado State Forest Service, the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, and other standards as determined by the county. So, of course, more mandates, more county regulations on people living up in mountain areas. So, definitely, still, I would say, an attack on rural and mountain homeowners.
They're just making it harder and harder to live in Colorado, especially in the Rocky Mountain region. I mean, it's going to be really difficult to live because I know how expensive it is already up there. I know I live in the metro area, but it's only a few minutes. But where I live is only a few minutes away from the foothills, so I can't imagine what the housing costs are going to be, and what this would raise housing costs too. I mean, yeah, I want a nice, safe home. Who doesn't want a safe home to live in? But I mean, this is just going to unnecessarily increase the cost of living up in the mountain areas.
Definitely. Definitely. So, still a bad bill being heard this Tuesday on April 30th in the Local Government Housing Committee, Senate Committee Room 352 at 2 p.m. So, especially if you're involved in a mountain property, this bill might be something to speak out against.
Oh, one question on this one. That mentions Jefferson County. I live in Jefferson County. How does that relate to individuals that live in suburbs?
Well, it's just from what I can see here currently, they're saying Jefferson County does require some form of wildfire mitigation in connection with the construction of a new residence. So they're just really making that point, trying to sell this bill, saying, hey, listen, there's already local counties that are already addressing this issue, and we're going to come in here and basically push that on every other county across Colorado.
Wonder how that's going to affect insurance on each of those possibilities for those homes.
That's a great question. I mean, it's interesting to see that the wildfire mitigation standards were pushed by this Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. So I imagine, if this is standardized across the state, they could say, hey, if you're not following these standards, then, that can affect your insurance.
Are you
for sure.
required to have this, just like flood insurance? You're required to have this insurance in order to buy that residence.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. So Senate House Bill 1300, bad bill there. Moving on, one more bill for Tuesday, talking about the affordable housing programs. House Bill 1308, effective implementation of affordable housing programs. So definitely wanted to bring this one up. This is an interesting one because has that bipartisan support from Lisa Frizzell, who was a county assessor before. So this bill does quite a bit. It requires that the Division of Housing include in the report specifics on uses of existing state and federal funds to provide best use of subsidies to maximize unit production and confirmation of rules and practices to ensure developments are not disqualified for funding support from the division if the development has previously received money from firms established by Prop 123. Prop 123 is that bad bill last year, taking away some of our taxpayer Bill of Rights refund money to go into this affordable housing scheme. So it looks like they're mostly an administrative bill, creating these procedures and timelines for this affordable housing program. But nonetheless, from a free market liberty perspective, it's not the role of the government to really get involved in housing. Really long bill. It's been amended quite a bit. So for those interested, dive in. But I would say, another way that the state government's trying to have control over housing in local communities and push this affordable housing schemes, all subsidized by taxpayers. So it made it through the House with all of those amendments and is now in the Senate. So to be heard in that Senate Local Government and Housing Committee, Senate Committee Room 352, Tuesday at 2 p.m. So that's what we got for Tuesday. If you're available to get down to the state capitol on Wednesday, Here are the bills that are going to be heard. I wanted to bring this one up again just because it's so ridiculous. It did pass. Other committee we talked about last week and is just flying through the legislature there. But, massage therapy education program hours, we all know what a serious issue in Colorado it is that massage therapists don't have an extra 150 hours worth of training. Thankfully, the state government, and of course, this is all tongue in cheek, this is absolutely ridiculous here. The state government's coming through and increasing the coursework and clinical work minimum requirement for licensed massage therapists in Colorado from 500 to 650 hours. So, this is the kind of thing our state government wastes so much time and money on. And just another example of occupational licensing creates additional costs and burdens on individuals who just want to give somebody a massage and get paid for it. So Senate Bill 201, very bad bill. Made it through the Senate previously and is now going through the House. So the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee, House Committee Room 112, upon adjournment of the House on Wednesday, May 1st. So a bad bill, another example of the state government totally acting inappropriately. All right. Senate Bill 149, thought this one is interesting because, obviously state employees, there's a lot of state employees here in Colorado. This kind of changes how workers' compensation works for them. Won't necessarily go through all the details here, but thought it was pretty interesting to see the changes made. Definitely a bill that is pro-worker or pro-state worker, pro-state employee, making it a little bit harder for the state government to stop people from getting workers' comp, I guess. So really helping individuals who are working in the state government in terms of their workers' insurance and workers' comp. So just an interesting bill. Don't want to dive too deep into it, but interesting bill down there. Totally changing, rewriting Colorado's law having to do with state employees getting workers' comp. So it made it through the Senate and onto the House. The House Business Affairs and Labor Committee, upon adjournment, House Committee Room 112 on May 1st. All right, so we did, let's see here. Another children's online data bill, of course, because these kids are being the parents are apparently not being responsible for their kids. So these legislators think it's their responsibility to come in and totally be the parent and say, hey, we're going to control how online activity occurs in Colorado related to children. So a little bit of a change to state statute here in this bill, amending the Colorado Privacy Act to add enhanced protections when a minor's data is processed and there's a heightened risk of harm to minors. The bill applies to any entity that controls consumer personal data and that conducts business in Colorado or delivers products and services that are targeted at Colorado residents, regardless of volume or the amount of revenue derived from the activity. A controller that offers an online service, product, or feature to a consumer that the controller knows or willfully disregards as a minor is required to use reasonable care to avoid any heightened risk of harm to minors caused by the service, product, or feature, conduct and review as necessary a data protection assessment for the service, product, or feature if there's a heightened risk of harm to minors. So, there you go. Unless a minor or a minor who is under 13 years of age, the minor's parent or legal guardian has consented, a controller is prohibited from processing a minor's personal data for targeted advertising, selling the minor's personal data, and profiling the minor's personal data for any processing purpose other than the purpose disclosed at the time the minor's personal data is collected. So there you go. So when you think about it, I can't help but think of the issue earlier with how do you prove whether they're a child or not? You can have that little pop-up box that says, are you over the age of 21? If you're going to a beer website or something like that. But, of course, real privacy concerns if the state's trying to require online companies to get some sort of ID or some sort of proof. I mean, we know that's coming. We know that's an issue they're pushing is this digital ID to try and to prove how old you are. So any comments on this one?
It reminds me a lot of 158.
It is interesting to note that it is the same Republican sponsorship on both bills too.
Very good.
Oh, interesting.
I'm definitely interested at the pushback that they may have gotten from some of the larger social media companies, such as Facebook, of course. This is definitely a big one, Snapchat, the others, because this is certainly going to have a pretty big impact on them, even though we are a relatively small percentage of the United States, much less the world, that is their consumer base. Definitely see the benefit, of course, of protecting minors, but ultimately it is the parents' responsibility to prevent their kids from having access to these different platforms. So again, this is just another way to take that responsibility away from the parent, put it onto the state. I mean, I think it's interesting, given some of the other states with recent things. I know Texas, so with Shane Gillis, the comedian, has talked quite frequently about the banning of Pornhub in the state of Texas without giving your ID. So I think this is definitely in that same realm, definitely focused, of course, more on the children than just the general population. But I know that the commies in the Gold Dome are going to want to expand that to other aspects as well.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say they're using kids as an excuse to ban to take control.
Yeah, of course. It's always for the kids. It's the safety of the children. The thing of the children reminds me of The Simpsons, Uh, what I thought highlighted here in the fiscal note was the entity. So this is some online entity must also not use system design features to increase minors' use of the service or product. So, you talk about those algorithms that kind of feed you what you want, or collect precise geolocation data, except in certain instances. So, you're really trying to get these online companies, a lot of, I think of like storefronts or social media or whoever, to create different sets of systems for people depending on their age, not necessarily entirely feasible for, I think, a lot of these people to say, here's an adult using the system. We can go ahead and try and, advertise to them because we know they like our product and service. And of course, advertising geolocating or geofencing in digital advertising has been so huge recently that to take that away from marketing companies and businesses is definitely going to make it harder for companies to provide goods and services that people actually want. So bad bill, Senate Bill 41 being heard on Wednesday in the Business Affairs and Labor Committee upon adjournment, House Committee Room 112 on May 1st. So bad bill there. All right, let's touch base one more time on Senate Bill 158 in the House Education Committee. So a terrible, terrible bill, of course, a lot of bad reasons. Please check out the beginning of this video when our special guest talked about how bad this bill is. But nonetheless, people show up, speak out, get involved on Wednesday. We'll post all the links about how bad this bill is. But just another example of them using, worrying about the poor kids on the internet and their ability to get drugs or whatever, that we need to now go after any individual and prevent them from having access to information, make it easier for law enforcement to investigate people using social media. And of course, kind of create this new system in which people have to prove how old they are, all dangerous things that threaten the integrity of online privacy. So love any other input on this one while we're on it.
One other quick note, there was a couple of opinion pieces put on Colorado politics, one specifically from the LGBT community about how it would adversely affect minors who are trying to keep that from, private, that this would actually kind of open up the possibility of them being exposed. And so it's getting hit from a number of different sides.
Well, great. Let's hope there is enough outcry, enough public input on this bill to kill it. It's these legislators, I think they want to avoid any extra controversy going into an important election year. So a bill like this, it's not really probably at the top of these people's lists for a passing. So hopefully, a little bit of pushback from the public will get it to be delayed and then pushed back till next year. But very, very bad bill. Check out the links we're going to post on this one to get involved. Speak out. Most importantly, if you can, Wednesday, show up at the House Education Committee upon adjournment of the State House on House Committee Room 107, May 1st. All right. We're going to move on. Also in the House Education Committee, best practices to prevent discrimination in schools. These state legislators think they can solve all of the problems that people face in day-to-day life. So, requiring the Department of Education to enter into an agreement with an organization. So that's some selected organization, I'm sure probably connected to teachers unions or some other legislator, to develop best practices for local education providers and specifically public schools to effectively respond to reports of harassment and discrimination.
Brandon, I'd love to jump in here if you don't mind.
Please.
Just
Please.
leave it right there where you're at on the screen. look at the sponsors, and tell me that there are any legislators that are more likely to have been bullied in school. This is purely something that they are doing to make up for their past grievances, as we've seen with several other legislators with some of the bills that they've been pushing this session. This has nothing to do with actually helping people, with the kids that are actually being bullied. As we know, that continues. We've seen recent examples in other states where furry identifying children are being able to harass and bite other children, and are allowed to do so because if the teacher stepped in and told them, no, you are not actually an animal, you are a human child, that would be discriminatory. So again, this is an absolute garbage bill that we should be opposed from the beginning.
Definitely. It's one of those bills that, a lot of people just on a surface level would look at and say, oh, this is a great idea, to have standardized sets of rules and training for educators to learn about harassment and discrimination. But I mean, they're usually extremely ineffective. There's going to be some DEI type of components built in, I'm sure. And, not necessarily a great use of taxpayer money. But yeah, another example of the state legislature thinking that they had this hubris to go in and solve every problem that occurs in our society. So bad bill being heard on Wednesday in the same education committee we just talked about upon adjournment, House Committee Room 107. So check that out if you're interested. Another bill we wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, one last thing I do want to say about that bill is look who one of the senators is who's a prime sponsor. That would be Faith Winter. I think every single thing that she does for the rest of this legislative session should be suspect, considering what's going on with her life. She should not be in a position of power right now. She needs to step down at least temporarily. She did for a week or so, but honestly, is that long enough for her current situation? I don't think so. She needs to take at least another week and a half off. She needs a few more weeks to really figure out what's going on in her life, because this is more than just a political issue. It's a safety issue for everybody around her, because the decisions she is making are going to result in her harming somebody else. So I think that this actually calls into everything she's doing into question right now, including this bill, but even on the roads, because if she's rolling around driving drunk, I mean, she's harming other people. I mean, that's an act violation. So let's I'm gonna say let's question the decisions of this bill and everything else she's doing going forward. She needs help. And I mean, I say that more than just as somebody who wants to, see everything she's doing go down in flames. I want to see her actually get some help.
Yeah, I'm all for Faith Winter and some of these other legislators taking the next 2 weeks vacation. I think that'd be a good thing for our freedom and liberty here in Colorado for sure. All right, so moving on here, I want to talk about House Bill 1262, the maternal health midwives. Bill we've talked about before, but creating this new licensure scheme to get midwives licensed here in Colorado. Unfortunately, bad bill. They should completely do away with the registration of midwives, if you ask me, and let them practice without government interference. But House Bill 1262 was supposed to be heard last year, got delayed, or last week, excuse me. It was supposed to be heard last week, got delayed, and now will be being heard again. It looks like the bill's been heavily amended, so I imagine part of the reason maybe it got delayed was to work on further amendments or to make it more palatable for some of these state senators. But nonetheless, Wednesday, May 1st, Health and Human Services Committee upon adjournment, Senate Committee Room 357. Bad bill there. Colorado should be a leader in helping midwives and others make those kind of health choices based on their own individual volition, not on some government edict. All right, so last bill we want to talk about, the only bill so far. Now, again, we're in the last 2 weeks of the legislature here. Do not be surprised if these committee hearings, new bills get added, especially as stuff passes out of the House and Senate, moves into the other chamber. These bills could get added at the last minute in committee. So, of course, this video is not the end all be all. There's expected to be a lot more of these bills get into these committees. So, check every day on the legislative website. But last bill, the only bill really being heard on Thursday as of now, thought it was interesting. Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, House Bill 1384. This bill would require the Department of Health Care Policy and Financing, in collaboration with the Behavioral Health Administration, Department of Human Services, to submit an application to the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services for certain certified community behavioral health clinic grant money, and then providing that report to the Joint Budget Committee on the status of their grant applications. So kind of another way for them to get some of this taxpayer money or this grant money coming into these behavioral health clinics. Just to at least wanted to bring it up because I know there's some people out there in this industry or involved in these types of behavioral health clinics, and just want to make sure people were aware of this bill out there, House Bill 1384. Interesting bill being heard Thursday, May 2nd, in the Health and Human Services Committee, Senate Committee Room 357.
I'd like to speak on this one, Brandon, if you don't mind.
Please.
So I am a registered nurse, as some may know. I started my career in mental health. I did worked at a behavioral health. It was a crisis stabilization / drug detox unit. That was one of these community funded kind of things, definitely with federal funding. It was the worst kind of private government partnership in which the funding, of course, came from the government, but the oversight was internal and there wasn't any. It was the worst that you can imagine. The doctors were sleeping with the nurses, giving them prescription drugs, all of that kind of stuff. The boss of the facility was not hiring based on merit at that time. It was just based on friends who she knew, had nothing to do with any kind of qualifications. So we did not run an effective facility, unfortunately. So I have seen firsthand how terrible that these involvements can be. And of course, getting federal grant money, sure. I mean, they're giving it out to all these foreign countries. Why not try and get some into our state? But even then, unfortunately, how these are handled and administered are almost never to the benefit of those that they're trying to, which are, of course, these people that are addicted drug users, alcohol users, etc.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor Lamb, do you think this bill would put more accountability on these reports in order to qualify for any funding? That's what I've always been concerned with.
I don't think so at all. I think it really is, it's just checking boxes, filling out paperwork to qualify for these funds. There isn't much oversight above and beyond that from my experience.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Of course, no problem.
So yeah, of course, some of the worst government-run healthcare already exists. You talk about like Veterans Veterans Affairs and some of these other clinics that receive federal funding, and how much of this money is squandered, wasted, or used improperly, right? So that's what we got this week so far. Again, like we were saying, there's a good chance that on Thursday might get loaded up. Old Ben in the comments on YouTube says the same thing, that committees will schedule hearings on provocative bills that might pop up. They kind of maybe left the calendar open a little bit for that. I imagine as stuff gets rushed through the House and the Senate as a whole, that we'll see more committees hearings or more bills added to these committee hearings as we go through the week here. So definitely for people to pay attention, get involved.
And really share that link, because daily you have to check every morning. In fact, I got an email when we did the Monday parental rights one. I got an email last minute in the morning. They were postponing it for the last item on the session. So it lasted. A lot of people were going down there at 1:30, and we stayed till 7 at night.
Wow.
So they'll move them around, whatever they can do, even just to thwart off people to show up.
Great point, Jody. Yeah, check, especially if you're planning on going to testify in one of these bills. If you're making the drive down there, check the legislative website before you go. As we talked about, Senate Bill 158, that changed. I mean, things can change, especially in these last 2 weeks. It gets pretty chaotic down there. So leg.colorado.gov is really your best resource. But like we do every week, let's take a look at some of the bills we've been tracking, some of the bigger bills keeping an eye on. So one of the big immigration bills that got introduced this year, this grant program for community-based organizations. Again, sometimes that's code word for aligned to the Democratic majority organizations who are going to get appropriate services for migrants. That will be heard on the House floor, so it did make it out of the House committees. On the House floor Monday, starts at 10 a.m. in the House chamber. So interesting bill for those keeping an issue on that one. All right, Senate Bill 182. This one definitely got a lot of outcry on social media, making it easier for illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, newcomers, whatever you want to say, to get driver's licenses. To basically taking away a lot of the safeguards requirements and checks that prevented them from getting driver's licenses in the past. And now, basically, if you got a passport or an ID from Honduras, Ecuador, Venezuela, you name it, you show up, you show them that, they say, okay, that's good enough for us. Go ahead. Here's your driver's license with this name. And there you go. So it did pass all the way through the Senate. It was a Senate Bill 182. Will be assigned to a House committee, I'm sure probably this week or next. Probably a bill that's going to get pushed through. So definitely one to keep an eye on, but it has not have a committee assignment as of today. Of course, the most controversial bill that's had 500, 600, 700 people speaking out against it in the committee hearing, 1292, banning a blanket gun ban on the most popular firearms that Coloradans own and use and purchase regularly, did pass the House. The Senate committee hearing has not yet been scheduled. So wouldn't be shocked if it doesn't get scheduled or if it just dies on the calendar. Really would not be. But we'll see. We'll see. People keeping an eye on this one very closely. Something to be very aware of. So it's going in the Senate State Veterans and Affairs Committee. So that's a calendar to keep an eye on for people who want to keep an eye on this bill. Look at their committee schedule. Senate Bill 75, the one to create more regulations over transportation network companies like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Uber Eats, all that kind of stuff. Bad bill. Didn't make it all the way through the Senate, but did not get assigned its committee hearing yet. There's a companion bill or a competing bill, I guess is a better way to put it, is House Bill 1129, which made it through the House but has not been assigned to the Senate yet. These are kind of competing bills in terms of trying to regulate these rideshare companies, basically, or network delivery companies, as they call them. This is the more extreme version of the bill. So if one of them has to fail, I hope 1129 is the one that fails. It's pretty bad. Definitely, we've seen other policies and laws push like Uber and Lyft out of places like Minneapolis. I mean, they're not going to operate there because the restrictions are too heavy. So that'd be a tragedy if that happened here. So bad bill 1129. We'll see if that gets assigned to a committee in the last few weeks here. Unfortunately, one of the gun bills that did pass, 1174, the concealed carry permits and training, did pass on the 22nd, so last week, out of the House and the Senate. So Polis hasn't signed it yet. Now, it does become law unless he explicitly vetoes it. He doesn't have to sign it for it to become law. It'll become law automatically. I want to say 10 days, but I just can't remember right now. But really bad bill. I would say unconstitutional. I would say too many requirements and restrictions on somebody's Second Amendment rights to be able to carry a firearm on their person. So I'm sure this bill will be challenged by people like our Rocky Mountain gun owners and others, which I encourage people to become members of. But really bad bill. Sad to see this one. I'd love it if Polis vetoed it, but highly doubt that's going to happen. House Bill 1296, bad bill. Modifying the Colorado Open Records Act. I'll actually be recording a video on this bill this week with a special guest. So keep an eye out for that. But really bad bill. Really disappointed in Republican Representative Matt Soper, who's pushed some big government bills this year, even killed civil asset forfeiture reform. But nonetheless, this makes it a little bit more difficult for people to get their Colorado Open Record Act's requests in there. Gives it more time for these state agencies to be delaying giving this information out to the public. Creates a new category where news media, of course, gets more special preferential treatment compared to people who are maybe like activists or voters or people out in the public. Making it harder for them and possibly even more costly for them to get information under Colorado's Open Records Act. Of course, the excuse is these county clerks or these local government officials are getting these Open Records Act requests, and it's too time consuming and too expensive for them to go after, and it's slowing down all their work. But nonetheless, hey, I thought we were supposed to be a representative government here. I thought we were supposed to have a transparent government, but bad bill. Hopefully it doesn't make it through the Senate, but we shall see. Really bad bill, Senate Bill 131, the prohibiting carrying firearms in sensitive spaces. Now, this one did get amended down quite a bit, so it's a lot more passable than it was previously, but will be heard on April 29th, Monday, on the House floor, the chamber as a whole. So tune into that on the Colorado channel. You can watch it live on YouTube as it goes through. So really bad bill. Be really disappointing. I fully expect it to pass the House, of course. It already made it through the Senate with its amendments, but hopefully another one that could potentially die in the calendar. However, I doubt it. Senate Bill 65, we've talked about this one a few times. This creates a new civil penalty for people who are caught using their cell phone while driving. Really bad bill, leading to more dangerous police encounters, potential for police violence against people who are just maybe using their cell phone to check directions while they're driving down the road, but now they're going to get a ticket, get pulled over, be put in a bad position. This committee hearing has not yet been scheduled yet, so keep an eye on that one, see if this one makes it through. I hope it doesn't, but we'll see. This one is going through the House, passed the Senate, Senate Bill 3, giving $1.7 million to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to go after firearms dealers, FFLs, gun shops, to go after them, see if they have the right size magazine capacity and all the other legal requirements. So bad bill being heard Monday on the House floor, April 29th. So fully expect that to pass and the CBI to get more money to go after people.
Brandon,
all they're going to... Go ahead.
No, Michael, you go first for sure.
I was just going to say, it seems kind of silly. They're going to do what they did a couple years ago with Senate Bill 3, and the gun dealers are just going to pull the parts out of the magazine, put it back in the bag, and just call it a parts kit again. That's all they're going to do. They stopped doing it because, and I know that Tom Sullivan got mad that they stopped doing that because that's why he introduced Senate Bill 3 to give them a power to enforce that law, plus a whole lot of other stuff. But I mean, it seems like a silly waste of time because they could still sell the parts kits.
Yeah, it's funny how the Democrats have been defund the police, but unless it comes to gun owners, and they say no, let's give them millions more dollars to go after gun owners and gun shops.
Or when it comes to protesting Israel, of course.
Oh yeah, that too.
But yeah, I just wanted to kind of go off topic slightly. Have we ever figured out why Tom Sullivan is wearing a New York Mets hat in his official profile picture?
I have no clue. Maybe he wants to emulate New York gun laws. I don't know.
Yeah, certainly the only reasonable explanation.
At least he's not wearing a hoodie like Fetterman.
I think that'd be preferable at this point for sure.
All right. So another bill we've been tracking, House Bill 1270, the firearm liability insurance requirement. This should be ruled unconstitutional. It's made it through the House, made it through the Senate. It has its Senate vote on Monday, April 29th at 10 a.m. Be interesting to see what state senators support this, which ones oppose it. Keep an eye on this one tomorrow, Monday, April 29th. Great bills from Stephanie Luck to allow legislators to publish their bill drafts online before the session starts, kind of giving people a heads up, kind of getting this information out there, creating a little bit more open, transparent government. Finally, it did pass out of committee and is finally getting a hearing on the House as a whole on Tuesday, April 30th, which convenes at 9 a.m. in the House chamber. So a good bill. Hopefully that one makes it through. All right, another bad bill. The towing carrier regulation, creating this new licensor scheme with fingerprints and all the rest for people who want to tow people's cars in Colorado. It did make it out of the House. The Senate committee hearing has not been scheduled. I know there's a lot of behind the scenes stakeholder meetings and this and that. So we'll see what finally this bill ends up like. But from a Liberty perspective, a very bad bill to create new regulations and government oversight over a tow truck industry. Bad bill. So many bad bills. House Bill 1373, the alcohol beverage retail licenses, basically trying to stop anybody from selling hard alcohol who's not a liquor store. So this is this protectionist type of bill coming out in defense of wine and liquor stores because they're losing too much revenue to grocery stores and gas stations. So bad bill. Hope this one doesn't make it through. Really bad, but because the voters explicitly approved allowing grocery stores and gas stations to sell beer and wine. But this is going to be heard on April 29th on the House floor, Monday, the House as a whole. So it's still going to go through the Senate. So we'll see where this one ends up.
Very sad to see a Republican and a solid mustache wearer of Perry Will be a supporter of this.
Yeah, Perry Will's got a great mustache, but not great sense when it comes to alcohol laws, and this is a prohibition type of law, unfortunately. But of course, they're trying to protect their little local liquor stores, so I understand the sentiment. I'm a big fan of supporting local liquor stores, but nonetheless, they shouldn't have government protection over them. Moving on, a bill that did pass and Jared Polis did sign was the 1098, the cause required for eviction of residential tenant, making it harder for landlords, property owners to evict people out of their property. So, of course, a bad bill that's going to have unintended consequences, I'm sure, by restricting the rental market, making it harder for people to get rentals overall. Market's going to respond how it responds, regardless of what these legislators say. So, bad bill, anti-property rights bill that are governor who claims to be a libertarian passed a really bad bill violating Colorado's property rights.
Well, I got to correct you. He specifically said he does not claim to be a libertarian, but he is portrayed as one in the media. But I did want to ask you, Brandon, if you had any input. I've seen quite a few comments, let's say, regarding this, with Javier Mabre being that is his entire business as an attorney that deals in evictions, about him being sued directly for any of this, because again, this is something he's directly benefiting from. I don't see that it would be any standing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know that there's legal standing to go after him because of it. I think there could be an ethics complaint filed against him. As here's a state representative sponsoring and pushing through legislation that he's going to directly have a financial benefit from. If anything, it's definitely an ethics violation, I would say. And the voters should definitely be made aware of it, and people should be upset about that. That legislators can use their position as an elected person, as an elected representative, to create better incentives for their companies, their industry to be successful. I mean, he's only going to be a legislator for a maximum of 8 years, right, in the House at least, and then he's going to go back to being an eviction. He's probably still an eviction attorney. I doubt he's stopped doing that just because he's serving in the House. So he's going to directly benefit from this potentially. So yeah, bad idea. I don't know that he could be sued because of it, but there should definitely be a little bit more outcry.
Thank you, Brandon.
Another one that passed, Polis had not signed yet, was 1039, the non-legal name changes, basically letting people change, requiring public schools and charter schools to use a student's preferred name if the student's name is requested by a student. Of course, circumventing parental rights and parents' ability to have control over their child, especially when they're experiencing some potential identity type of issues. So that bill did pass. Of course, I expect Polis to sign it or just let it become law without signing it. Now the bills that died that we've been tracking, Senate Bill 33, the lodging property tax, quadrupling property taxes on rental properties, thankfully was killed. The regulate favorite tobacco products, killed for the third year in a row, thankful for that. The pet animal registration system, still can't get over that, 1163. That one did meet an unfortunate demise, thankfully. The overdose prevention centers, surprisingly making it all the way through the House, but being killed in its first Senate committee, was killed. Very interesting to see how far that made it this year compared to previous years. Unfortunately, the reduction of the state income tax also was killed, 1065. The vulnerable road user protection enterprise, this would have created a new fee or tax, if you want to be more accurate, on pretty much every vehicle in Colorado, especially if they're above a certain size, to pay for bike lanes. So glad this bill died. Driving is expensive enough. The one Senate Bill 159 to basically shut down the oil and gas industry by 2030, 2032 by stopping issuing new permits and not renewing permits, thankfully did die. I was really surprised that it made it as far as it did. Not a great sign, but thankful that it did stop. You may have seen some of the oil and gas TV commercials the past couple months, and it was response to this and other bills. New one to the list. A new one to the list since last time. A bill we've been talking about since January. Senate Bill 43, the direct-to-consumer sale of raw milk. Now, I 100% support food freedom, of course, from a liberty perspective. I think everybody on this call would. So I think it's a great idea that individuals should be able to buy raw milk if they want to without the state interference. Unfortunately, Colorado has some of the worst raw milk laws in the country. This bill would not have done a great service to raw milk. If you ask me, it would have created a new regulatory scheme where the Department of Health would be going to these raw milk suppliers or distributors or whoever and really getting into their business. So I was happy this bill died because it created a new burden on these raw milk producers.
Yeah.
So there we go. Go for it, Michael.
I think with the raw milk sales bill, I think the biggest disappointment was last year we created a pledge with the Republicans that said, hey, if you can adhere to this set of principles, we're not going to run a individual in a race, specifically targeting a lot of these real tight races that are too close to call, where the Republicans might have a real shot to kind of fight back, get some of the crazy progressives. And one of the points that we put specifically in the bill was we want to see people introduce a raw milk bill and promote the ability to drink raw milk. And they came out with this bill, but it was just such a bastardization of every single principle that we were looking for inside that bill that you kind of had no choice but to vote against it or hope the thing was killed. And it was really frustrating to see. So let's hope that something like this gets reintroduced next year, but something that's going to be a little bit more liberty friendly, so that way they're not so intrusive to the dairy industry, because stuff like this has been passed in other states and nobody's actually implementing it because of how harmful it is to the dairy industry.
Oh, great points. I'm glad you brought up the pledge. The Libertarian Party of Colorado working with the Republican Party to really try and push the Republican Party more towards liberty candidates. I think that's an important theme we'll see throughout the 2024 election. And yeah, hopefully we get some good pro-liberty legislators down there serving in 2025 after this year's election who can support raw milk and food freedom. Would love to see it. So here we are in the last 2 weeks of the damage being done to our pocketbooks, our businesses, our families, our gun rights, everything you can imagine. So we've done 16 of these videos so far, basically, live stream or not, since January. So really appreciate people getting involved, speaking out. We'll have another one next week, and hopefully we'll be wrapping it up and trying to get some better legislators elected this next cycle.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week and keep plugging.
Thank
Awesome.
you, everybody.
Appreciate it, Jody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other comments from anybody before we call it?
Actually, yeah. Did you already cut it, Brandon?
No, it's still going. I just stopped the screen share.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, just wanted to invite everyone out to Keensburg. Next weekend on Saturday, the 4th, we have our Tree City USA event. Gonna have a band, gonna have a hawk exhibition with some falconry. So giving away a bunch of free trees, gonna have the Future Farmers of America with a lot of plants and everything. So let's have a great turnout. So come on up to Keensburg. Starts at 1 p.m. next Saturday, May the 4th, Star Wars Day.
Awesome. Hope to make it out there. Great. Perfect. And
I'd say
just a parting message, even though we're towards the end of the session, people still show up and testify. Please speak out. Please reach out to these legislators. Like we were saying, there's a limit to the bills they're going to be able to get through in this little home stretch. So anything that's maybe a little more controversial or something they can put on the back burner and, not go into this election with having to deal with, like hopefully 158, hopefully that can be all it takes, because they're going to have to be so selective about what bills they want to push through. The calendar is our best friend for liberty at this point, and it just show up and speak out, people. I mean, there's something to be said about dragging these committee hearings out by having a lot of people show up and speak out and kind of slow down the process, because the legislator can only meet for a certain amount of time and then it's done for the year. So anything that can be done to slow down this last little bit is a good thing. So awesome. Well, appreciate it, everybody. We'll see you again next week, and get involved, stay active, and